Welcome back to the It's Too Easy podcast. This is episode 2. I'm Zach. This is my brother Jake, and we're just going to recap a little bit about what happened last week, the picks we gave out, and then dive into what we're looking forward to this week. So, with college football, obviously we got hot. We gave out a bunch of winners. Notre Dame covered, Utah covered, Colorado won that game. Oregon ended up covering on a clutch pick six at the end of the game. Tulane was a heartbreaker, so we had an L on that one. But Washington State covered the 6.5 and money line, like we said. And then obviously the Texas Alabama game we talked about as well. I thought it was going to be a good game, and we got exactly that. NFL was a little in between, and then UFC was right about the same. So, Jake, out of last week's games, which one stood out to you the most? What are you looking forward to with teams going forward this week?
Yeah, obviously, the first thing that pops to mind about last week was that Bama Texas game. Obviously, we had talked about briefly about there's always a team that comes willing to play Bama and that's ready to play Bama, and boy, did we find that out in week 2, right? Like Texas just came out and it seemed like they had an answer to everything that Bama did, and to be honest, I don't know how Bama recovers from that. They're gonna have some tough teams to play during the season, and at this point, it's tough to see them not losing a second game because last week I'm thinking, maybe they lose one game during the season, but they'll be able to bounce back. But after that loss to Texas, it's clear that they have some question marks with that team. So I'm interested to see kind of how that goes forward for Bama. What did you think of that game specifically? Because that one was all over ESPN. Game day was there. I know specifically, you had some good thoughts on that one before it started.
Yeah, I mean, like I said last week, I thought that the 7.5 point spread was a lot considering how the game went the week before, or last year, sorry, with that same matchup. Coming down to a last minute field goal, no Ewers, and then Ewers played all game. Texas handled them by 10. They also had a field goal early where Xavier Worthy, one of the guys we talked about last week, one of the best receivers in college football, he dropped a pass in the end zone that he catches 99 out of 100 times. So they had points that they left off the board. I think really what they ended up doing was stacking the box on defense, making it so Alabama had a hard time running the football, making Milroe have to throw to beat them. And he looked uncomfortable. He doesn't necessarily look like he's ready to go as the starter. So it is going to be interesting to see moving forward if they can beat Ole Miss or LSU or even a Tennessee kind of team who hasn't looked great either, but also have the same problem with Milton coming in and not looking too confident yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And then obviously with Milroe looking as uncomfortable as he did in the beginning stages to later stages, you kind of get a feeling of the clutch factor. It kind of feels like Alabama's always had that clutch factor going towards the end of the game, and he was sort of bringing it there in the third quarter, bringing him back close. But then every single time Texas just had the answer. It felt like they were always able to get 6 right back, and at some point, they were just able to get the possession back and just close out the game. So yeah, great game with that one. College game day in week 2, incredible. A couple other teams that really stood out. I personally was not all that big on Michigan in the first couple weeks, but after this game last week, I've definitely had a little bit more convincing that team is going to be ready to go when push comes to shove against some of the better teams. Without their coach, they've been playing really well. They run the ball really well. Corum is definitely going to be one of the guys in the Heisman race, and I expect big things from Michigan now after seeing kind of these first couple weeks. How they manage the game. I didn't know exactly how the clock rule would impact it. I didn't think the clock rule would have a big effect on it, but I think that with them just being able to consistently run the ball, it's going to be tough for other teams to get consistent possessions against them. And with their defense playing as well as they are, they're going to be able to steal those possessions from their opponents. So yeah, I'm looking for Michigan to kind of, especially their plus minus, their turnovers is going to be huge because since they're such a possession oriented team, it's going to be all about how many times you have the ball versus your opponents. And, if their defense can stay off the field, they're going to be ready to go for sure for the end of the season. So
Yeah, and then this week also they have Bowling Green, so they should walk right through that team, and then Harbaugh's going to be back, and they're going to be ready to play for him.
exactly.
So it will be interesting to see how hot they get coming after that.
Yeah, another game that really interested me, obviously, my Oregon Ducks versus Texas Tech. We did not look good at all whatsoever. I was expecting that our coaching staff and our players would have a little bit more intel on Shaw and kind of how he was looking to play this game. And I do think that we played the pass pretty well. Our secondary was pretty good for the most part. There were a few little bips here and there where he'd complete a long pass and just looked like a lapse in judgment, or somewhere the coverage was broken. But for the most part, I was more concerned about how much Shaw was able to run the ball. Our linebackers for the last couple of years have been top notch, so it's weird seeing a quarterback just being able to kind of have his way and break open 20, 30-yard runs when he's not even really known for running the ball. So that definitely worries me going forward, because we're going to have to play tough teams with good quarterbacks that are definitely more mobile than Shaw. So it's definitely something that I have my eyes on going forward. How is our defense going to be able to play against the Caleb Williamses? Michael Penix is obviously more in the pocket, but even Cam Rising is going to be able to run coming off of his injury. I think he'll be fine and be able to run against us. So if we can stop the run, that's great. But if we can't stop the quarterback from running, then how are we going to be able to stop the throw? So that's the biggest question mark that I have for our team. Obviously, it looked good bringing it back towards the end there. We were down 10 with, I think, 4 minutes or 5 minutes left in the third quarter. We're able to bring it all the way back up to win by 8 and cover. It was huge. The momentum towards the end of the game just felt, like it completely shifted back in our favor. It felt like after we got that pick, like our team, we may have a little bit, more higher expectations going forward for our defense. And now they may have the experience to deal with some of those situations, but you never know in the long run how they're going to be able to handle, these top 5 quarterbacks that are going to be looking to go to these teams in the draft and get paid big money. So that's the biggest thing.
The biggest thing I think I noticed for Oregon was the amount of drives that should have ended for Texas Tech that they ended up going to score on because of penalties. I think they had 4 defensive PIs that were costly that kept drives going. They ended up scoring on all of them. I think we were talking about it. They had 10 penalties, 100 yards at halftime.
Yeah, I think they ended with like 15 or 16 penalties, and I mean you're lucky to escape with a win away against a seasoned team with a quarterback that's been in college for 3 years playing against these type of kids. So it's going to be
interesting. He ended up doing better than I thought, being able to run it. I think he had a 57-yard run to start the game. Kind of broke things open, got short passes going early. So he definitely performed better than I thought. But hey, at the end of the day, Oregon got the dub, so that's all that really matters.
Yeah, it's relieving on the one hand, although our defense looked like shit playing against Shaw. It is relieving to see that our defense was able to create as many turnovers as they did, because those were able to really swing the game back into our favor, and they happened at really clutch moments of the game. So hopefully we can kind of continue that momentum, and our defense, we can lean on them to create the turnovers when we need it, because I feel like that's going to be a lot of this team for us, is going to be that grit and being able to get the ball back to our offense to be able to put in work, because our offense so far through the first 2 weeks looks good, but after this weekend, I see a little bit more do or die. Like, we're not just gonna, we're either gonna drive down in 4 plays or we're going 3 and out. It's not like we're gonna have 3 first downs and then punt the ball. We're either gonna get rolling or we're punting. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how our defense is able to get the ball back to our offense going forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then moving forward with college football this week. Honestly, it's kind of a crappy slate that we got. All the big games are going to be 2 weeks from now. We're going to have a great weekend of football. I know Clemson, Florida State, Notre Dame, Ohio State. I'm looking forward to that one. There's a bunch of good ones the following week. But this week, is there any games that kind of catch your eye?
There's only a couple that I truly looked at and I was like, oh, that could be a good game to watch, and could be fun to bet on that one, if you have a lean one way or another. The first one I really liked was LSU versus Mississippi State. LSU obviously got their butt handed to them in week 1. And then last week they came out and scored, I think it was like 70-something points or 80-something points, and took care of business. I look for them to bounce back again against Mississippi State. I just feel like they're the better team. 9.5 is not enough. I feel like LSU covers that no problem. Mississippi State had a good win this weekend. It was against, I think, one of our Pac-12 teams. I can't remember if it was Cal or who it was, but they had an okay win. Maybe Arizona.
Yeah.
But yeah, they had a decent win against a Pac-12 team, but it wasn't, one of our upper echelon teams that are in the top 25. So probably wasn't anything super crazy to brag about. And for that reason, I think that LSU is just, for the opening SEC game, LSU is just going to take it to them, try and get their mojo back, and just going forward, be able to kind of put their season back in order. So that's definitely one that I'm looking out for.
Okay. Right.
Another game that I really like is, we had talked about this a little bit earlier, UNC versus Minnesota. UNC is at home, and they're only getting 8 points at home. They've had a couple tough games to open the season, and I think it's just due to the competition. I think that the teams that they're playing are just, the first game of the season was NC State, and they looked
South Carolina.
South Carolina,
Yeah.
and then and they looked okay against them, but obviously they had their own struggles. But those Carolina games, like, you can't always trust what you're seeing. And so I think that, and UNC, since they're playing at home against Minnesota, they're not one of the teams that's going to have to travel to cold. I think Drake May has one of those breakout games where he kind of lets everybody know, this is who I am. You guys don't forget about me, because there's all these other quarterbacks and players that are coming up now. And Drake May's kind of been put on the back burner, but I think that this is that week that he goes, hey, I'm still here. They're going to win this game by at least 14, 17 points. I think it's handily. I don't think Minnesota is as good as they've been in the past, but obviously they're always a good defensive team. So it'll be an interesting game to watch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's going to be a good game. I was thinking about going. I'm going to end up working it, so I'm not going to be going to that one. But I know with how Appalachian State looked against UNC last week, I mean, they took them to double overtime, ended up losing 34-40. But UNC has they've not looked very good, and Minnesota, I will say, has not looked good. I'm big on their QB. I love Athan Kaliakmanis. Through 2 games, he's looked terrible. Like, all the faith I have in him is not really there. They're good at running the ball, so if they can run it against UNC, they might be okay. Appalachian State kind of tore apart that UNC offensive line, but like you said, they're going to bounce back. Drake May hasn't looked good at all in either of the first 2 games, so I do think he's going to try and get, people are talking about it. I think he's going to show people that he's that guy, and he's going to try and get a double-digit 14, 17-point win, like you said. So yeah, that should be a good one. One of the games I'm looking forward to now, Ohio State. Yeah, so I'm interested in that Ohio State game because they finally announced that Kyle McCord is going to be the starter, and he has been starting, but they've been putting in a different guy as well. But they've even so only put up 23 on Indiana, 35 on Youngstown, I think it was last week. So their offense with Mian Williams, Travion Henderson both running it, Julian Fleming, Marvin Harrison, Amika Egbuka, and Cade Stover. Like, they have 6 of the best weapons in college football. It is going to be interesting to see if they do cover that 29-point spread against a 2-0 Western Kentucky team. That's one of the games I do think they end up covering 29. I think this is the game where he's like, all right, I got the confidence. They said it's going to be me. He finally found Marvin Harrison this last week. I think he had 150 yards, 2 scores at halftime.
Yeah, dude was a beast. I think he got clocked running like 22.2 miles an hour, which is the fastest ever of anyone. I think Tyreek Hill was the fastest before that, like 21.6 or something. So that's pretty insane. I mean, that alone could catapult him into the top 5 in the draft.
Yeah, but that defense has looked good. I think Kyle McCord's going to have that swagger now that he's officially the starter, and he's finding the weapons. They need to get back to the ground game with those 2 stud running backs, and I think that they're going to cover that big 30-point, 29-point spread. Yeah, I mean, Duke, I watched them beat Clemson by 21, and they have Northwestern, who's looked terrible. They were terrible last year. They're 18-point favorites, so I do think that they're going to be able to cover the 18 points. And Tulane was the game that let me down last week. Going into it, I definitely thought Michael Pratt was playing. He ended up not playing, but they kept it within 7 up to a minute 45. 4th down conversion, they stuck him at the line. False start, ended up redoing the down. Ole Miss kicked a field goal from 56 or 57 yards, went up 10. Fumble for 6 to end the game. Made it, 16, 17-point game when it really was 1 score the whole time.
If you watch that whole game, you can see how tragic that really was. Tulane was up 10 early, had the whole game in their hands. Then towards the end, just completely fell apart in that last fourth quarter.
Yeah, and you could tell that they were missing Pratt. The backup didn't look phenomenal, but he looked like he was doing enough to at least keep them around, have a chance to win it. But I do think they bounce back this week, 12-point favorites against Southern Miss. I know that's where Frank Gore Jr. is at, but they just, they're not that good of a team. I think Tulane is a good team, so they're just going to try and bounce back, and I think Pratt's going to be playing this time. But yeah, again, not that many good games this weekend. I know they got the backyard brawl is West Virginia Pitt.
Yeah,
Uh,
that should be a fun one if you want to watch it there. But I mean, where do you put your money there after watching those two teams the first 2 weeks is pretty tough call. It's pretty risky. And then other than that, there's TCU and Houston play, but both those teams obviously have already lost, and um, you know, fun one to watch, but not necessarily two of the better teams in the college football playoff or in the college football atmosphere, I should say. Um,
yeah. I think the last game I did want to talk about was the Washington Michigan State because it's in Michigan State. They've always had a good defense. They have a good defense again this year, but Washington's 16-point favorites going on the road. I know Michigan State is without their coach, so which side of that spread are you kind of leaning on?
Specifically for that game, I like Washington with the points. I think Michigan State, yeah, they've always had that defense, but Washington's one of those teams where they kind of just expose you. And with those three guys at wide receiver, if they're able to spread the ball out early, I just don't see a game in which this is close. Like I could see this easily being like a 48-17 game or like 48-14 game. Like I could see this being an absolute blowout. And I think that Washington covers the 16. 16 may be a little much for me to put money on. But if I could buy a few points and maybe get 14 or 13 and a half, and just to feel comfortable at two scores, I would definitely do that.
Okay, right on. Yeah, and then like I said, this week's slate's not very good. We'll be diving into a lot more next week for college football, but I think it's a good time to switch over to NFL. Kind of talk about what we saw this week, what we didn't expect,
Absolutely.
what games were standing out to you, which players looked good, which ones looked bad. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
So obviously, huge opening week for NFL. Let me get all the games pulled up here, all the scores. But yeah, the first thing I noticed, obviously, Chiefs without Chris Jones and without Travis Kelsey looked a little bit off base. They just weren't the championship level team that they were last year. And obviously, it showed how much it hurt in that game because the next day they got a deal done and he got paid big time. I think, what did you say it was, like 19 million or something like that, and up to 25 with incentives. I mean, that's a
Yep.
big time contract for a big time player. Only a 1 year deal. He has that chance to go prove himself now and chance to go win another Super Bowl. So we'll see how that plays out with the Chiefs. It'll be interesting to kind of see how they bounce back because yes, Chris Jones and Travis Kelsey are two players, but they are obviously the key players to both the offense and the defense. So
Hmm.
you want to get a gauge on how much they actually affect the game and affect the team. And this week we'll definitely get a better chance to see how that affects them because they play the Jaguars away. So
Hmm.
that's going to be a tough game in itself.
Yep. Yeah, it's hard
Um,
to go into Jacksonville and win. I mean, Jacksonville obviously struggled a little bit with the Colts this week, but ended up taking care of business at the end of the game. Calvin Ridley looked phenomenal, like we expected. But yeah, I
yeah,
mean, Kelsey's the big thing. They don't even, have him listed as playing quite yet. He's still questionable for the game. If they're without him, I think Jags are going to handle him. If
yeah.
Kelsey plays, I do think it'll be interesting. I know the Chiefs have beat them the last couple times that they matched up, but again, it's in Jacksonville, and that team looked like they got everything going in that first game at the second half.
Yeah, it really feels like Trevor Lawrence is building his confidence off of that season that he had last year. They made it to the playoffs. They beat the Chargers in the first round. I feel like that team, they're going to be a sleeper for sure this season. They've got a good defense. They're building around their quarterback. They've paid him, I think. Didn't they pay Trevor Lawrence? Maybe not yet. Was he one of the
I'm
ones
not
that
sure.
didn't get paid yet? But
I'm not sure.
regardless, he's going to get paid
I don't think he
because
has because this is third year.
okay. Well, regardless, I do think he is going to get paid because he has that team in a good spot. I mean, thinking about that team before he got there, they were like 2-11 or 2-14 or something like that. They were a 2-3 win team. Didn't have any sort of direction. Doug Peterson was their coach. He didn't know, or was it Doug Peterson? Someone else was their coach. He didn't have any clue what he was doing. Urban Meyer, I think, is who it was.
Yeah.
And then they hired Doug Peterson. He finally got everything back on track. But
Mhm.
it's interesting because the Jaguars, I think, are going to be the sleeper team that nobody talks about, and then they're going to win 11 games, win a couple playoff games, and everybody's going to go, oh crap, hello, look at this team, they're really good. So we'll see
Mhm.
how that kind of plays out for them. But this game against the Colts was definitely a good win for them, 31-21. Obviously defense didn't play as well as they were hoping against Anthony Richardson, but He's a rookie guy, 6'5", I think he is, or 6'4". Pure athleticism. There's only so much you can do against that.
Yeah. I did want to shout out Anthony Richardson. I called him a bum on the podcast last week. I still think he's a bum. I said he couldn't complete a pass, and he was 66, 67%. So he did look pretty solid against that Jacksonville defense. So it'll be interesting to see how he does moving forward.
Yeah, I think that definitely kind of goes to show the level of talent that was around him at Florida. He didn't necessarily have all the people to throw the ball to, but he's still making plays. So I think, as long as they can build around him and, don't pull the same thing that all these other teams do when they draft a rookie quarterback, is they draft their rookie, try and get him paid, and then don't focus on anything else. They need to do more of a Niner thing and try and build around him. And hopefully if they can get that accomplished, they'll be a team that's definitely going to be on the lookout for the next 5 years for sure.
Yep.
The next game that really caught my eye after that one was the Bucs and Vikings. Vikings,
the big show. Let's go, baby.
Yeah, I mean, Baker was carving them up. Obviously, a lot of people are going to see that he had their signs in the second half. He knew exactly what the defense was running. When they gave their signs out, he knew exactly what he needed to run, and he was able to execute. So it's good to see Baker being able to play his role and kind of step into that more of a franchise quarterback position for them, because they didn't have any sort of direction before the season, but starting out 1-0, and especially in that division, to where that's a real question mark, is going to be really good for them going forward. And their defense looked pretty solid. I mean, Kirk Cousins didn't really get a whole lot going. He had that one pick.
He threw for 350, I think. But
it's still he still has Justin Jefferson.
He's got this guy. Yeah, he's got this guy to throw to.
So he's still going to get his. But I mean, to play him as well as they did, only give up 17 points on 350 passing yards, get the pick. I think they had another turnover that they got as well. The defense looked solid, and it just looked like a good team win for the Bucs, which is not something that I was expecting in week one.
Yeah, they were able to capitalize on those 3 turnovers, and that really was the difference maker. 2017, close game on the road, and I was happy to see Baker get a win. And the Vikings, like we talked about last week, they won a bunch of close games, ended up with, I think, 13 wins, and I don't think they'll get as many of those this year. This year. The Eagles on Thursday night, short week's going to be a tough follow-up game to that, so we'll see how that game plays out.
Yeah, the Vikings, I think, are in for a bit of a rough season. I think just last season was a bit of a fluke. They just found themselves winning games that they shouldn't have won. And this season's going to bring them a little bit more back down to what they should expect from this team. Maybe a 9-8 team, 10-7 team. Something back on planet Earth. Into realism for that Vikings team for sure.
Yeah, and then finding the new QB, because they talked to Kirk and said, "Hey, man, this is your last year, and we're not paying you to stay." So obviously, he's got to go in and play, knowing that. What's he going to do is a good question. Maybe a good target for the Jets after Aaron Rodgers gets hurt. I don't know.
That's going to be another talking point, is who's going to fill in. Are they going to go out and get somebody, or are they going to trust Zach Wilson to put in the work and be that guy for them this season?
Yeah, I mean, that division just got even more interesting. The playoff race, like we said last week, I was like, Steelers and the Chargers, I ended up having missed it because I gave the Jets that nod barely. And, maybe that opens up a door for a Chargers team to sneak in, who did look good. Granted, they didn't get the win against the Dolphins. I mean, what a game.
Yeah.
Tyreek Hill, just absolute animal. Shout out to him. He got me 45 on fantasy. That's why I picked him number 5. I've never had him. But the Cheetah was 215 yards to a hell of a game, 466 yards on that Chargers team. And, I mean, Herbert looked solid, and Eckler and Josh Kelly both ran for 100 yards. So, game of the week for sure. What were your thoughts on that one?
Chargers-Dolphins was for sure my game of the week. Obviously, I'm an Oregon fan, so Justin Herbert is my guy. I was there with him at college, and even got a chance to speak with him a little bit. Nicest guy. It sucks that they couldn't pull it out. It sucks that he couldn't bring up the clutch factor there in the final 2 minutes of the game. But I do think they have a lot of positives to look at from that game. A lot to build on defensively, because they got to play the fastest players in the NFL in the first game of the season. And going against their division, they're going to be able to kind of fine tune how they're going to play around, filling in those gaps. Specifically in their secondary, because they just looked terrible in that game. J.C. Jackson got beat quite a bit, specifically by Tyreek Hill, and I think that's going to be a learning experience for him. Um,
Yeah.
but I do think that Herbie looked really good. He got his money. That the offense looked pretty good. There's not much that they could have done to look better other than to just clutch up and win in the final moments. But
Mhm.
a quick penalty will set you back, and there's not much you can do about it. But the Dolphins, I mean, you have to talk about the Dolphins. The Dolphins look like the most explosive team in the NFL. They clearly have, the fastest guys in the NFL because nobody could even, keep up with Mostert or Hill or Waddle. I mean, everybody was catching the ball all over the field. And, even with losing Gesicki, it didn't look like they had lost anything. We'll see how the Dolphins are able to build off of that win because their defense still had, some holes, obviously. And Herbert's just going to make plays. But, I was expecting a tough game, and we sure got it. But Dolphins to come out in week 1 is huge for them going forward because, like, in that division, Jets and the Bills losing week 1, I mean, you leave yourself wide open to just run it. And
Mhm.
if they can keep that momentum rolling, I think that there's a chance that they do win that division pretty handily, especially after that performance the Bills put out.
Yeah, I mean they were playing a tough defense in the Jets, and obviously our Cowboys are going to have to take that one on this weekend. But yeah, I mean I had those Dolphins winning the division as a good start. I mean, like we said, if Tua stays healthy, that's a tough team. I will say with that defense, I mean Christian Wilkins up front, um, they ran for Chargers ran for 250 on them. Like,
Yeah, they ran for over
uh,
200 yards.
yeah, it's like I was kind of confused what was going on there because I thought that was a great all around team that the Dolphins had, and obviously the secondary looked good. But they're going to have to get some of those issues fixed up front. They can't be letting teams run all over them, especially going in this weekend into New England, um, where the Patriots, Mac Jones just threw for 300 on Philly, so they like to run the ball, and if they can get it running and then still let Mac air it out, that might be a tough game for him this week as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So speaking about that, what are some of your games for this week's NFL? That which games are you picking? Which teams are you leaning on? What do you like?
There's a lot of good games this week, must say. First one that stood out to me was the Chiefs are favored by 3.5 against the Jaguars, and the Jaguars are at home this week.
Hmm.
Jaguars put it on the Colts. It's tough to see them losing again, but I feel like now that Chris Jones is signed and if Travis Kelce is back, I'm definitely taking that 3.5. Um,
Hmm.
I think that the Chiefs are going to be able to get it done. They kind of have the Jaguars number. Trevor Lawrence, it definitely still has some development to go through, and I think that this Chiefs defense with Chris Jones will just be a little bit too much for them. I think that they'll be able to make the plays, get the ball back into Mahomes' hands, and let him score. So, hopefully Travis Kelce will be playing because if he is, I will definitely be taking the Chiefs 3.5. If the numbers move, I'll definitely have to reassess. But that's the first game I'm looking at. What do you think of that game, Chiefs and Jaguars?
That's a tough one. I like home teams for the most part, especially when they're solid, playoff teams like the Jaguars. Like you
Yeah,
said, though, if they don't have Kelsey, I already talked about this year. I don't think they're going to be as good because they don't have a wide receiver one. If Kelsey's not there, I think they lose by 10. If Kelsey plays, I could still see it going either way, but I can't see the Chiefs starting 0-2. Watching the Chargers and potentially Raiders get a lead on them in the division if Chargers either win one or Raiders get two. So I do think Chiefs are going to bounce back. I don't think I'm going to touch the line, but I am going to take the Chiefs in the game.
all right, so money line for the Chiefs.
Hmm.
Second game that I really liked, I'm not sure if you've gotten a chance to look at this one yet, but the Bengals have a 3.5 point favorite against the Ravens.
Hmm.
That's a super interesting game because the Ravens looked solid in the first week, just good enough to handle. I can't remember who it was they played. It wasn't the
Texans. It was
Texans. It wasn't a
Texans.
very good
Yeah.
team. Um, but I think that this is going to be a proving game for the Ravens. They got a lot of studs. I think that the Bengals after last week have a lot to figure out. So I mean, why
Hmm.
not? Why not take it to them again and beat them? I think that in this game, 3.5 is for this Bengals team that struggles early in the season. I think I'm taking the Ravens plus 3.5 if I can get it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm expecting a huge bounce back game. Jamar Chase, I think, always goes off against the Ravens. I think the last two matchups last year had 80 plus yards. I think he's averaging like 116 against them in his career. So I think he's going to play well. I think Joe Burrow is going to play well. The Ravens, handled the Texans. It wasn't pretty. They also had a lot of penalty issues. And then, like I was talking about, they're my Super Bowl pick. I do think they need to get established with the run game. And then down goes Dobbins just like that yet again.
Yeah, that
So
poor kid.
that's a tough blow because the guy's a stud, but he hasn't gotten to prove anything. And now it's going to be on Gus Edwards again, who also has gotten hurt a couple times. So we'll see how that game goes. I'm leaning on that Ravens plus 3.5. Originally this season, in my preseason predictions, I had the Bengals winning this one at home. But yeah, after starting slow last year, I think they're probably going to start slow again. I watched that game against the Browns that got annihilated. Granted, it was in the rain, um, but the Ravens offense still didn't look, like they were clicking on all cylinders. What did I say about Zay Flowers? The guy's a stud. Put him in your
Yep,
fantasy lineup. He balled. So
yep.
seeing that, slowly working OBJ back in. Mark Andrews was a no-show. So I mean, without him playing, still handling the Texans, I do think it's going to be a great game in Cincinnati, and I'm hoping that the Ravens come out on top in that one.
Yeah, and I think we got to see what we wanted to see from the Baltimore defense in week one. CJ Stroud, rookie quarterback coming in, you got to play a tough team with a tough defense and a quarterback and a bunch of offensive players that just got paid. And they just took care of business. They handled the rookie quarterback, showed him that you don't have what it takes to be here yet. I don't see anything change in week two. I think that plus 3.5 against the Bengals is it's just too much. I think the Ravens will
Mm-hmm.
definitely find a way to cover that, whether it be they lose by 3 off of a last minute field goal from McPherson or whatever it is. I just think that there's no way they don't cover that 3.5 this week.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. Yeah,
Next
I'm
game
liking
on
the
the
Ravens.
slate that I'm really interested in is there was one Lions and Seahawks.
Mm-hmm.
So the Lions are getting 5.5 away, or are they? No, they're at home.
They're giving 5.5. Yeah.
Yeah, they're giving 5.5 at home, and the Seahawks just looked terrible in Week One. I mean, I wasn't expecting much from the Rams coming into this season, and without Cup, they were just able to handle them. And I think the game was in Seattle too, so that was even more of a question mark for me. Was it in Seattle? I can't
Um,
remember. It was in Seattle. So yeah, I mean, it's
yeah.
so weird because the Seattle crowd with the 12th man, you expect them always to play a factor and just walk in and first game of the season get run out of your own building. In
Mm-hmm.
Seattle, just it didn't make much sense to me. So I think Lions 5.5 is a tough number because you're not used to seeing the Lions with a minus next to their name.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'd necessarily take the points, but I definitely like the Lions money line in this game at home. Second game of the season, they have a lot to prove. This team, obviously, they've been building it up for now the past 2-3 seasons, just dealing with whatever comes their way. And I just think this season they've got it going to put it together, and they'll definitely win this game. But I don't know, 5.5 might be too much, but money line for sure on the Lions.
All right. I know. Yeah, I'm not too sure on that one. I'm feeling like the Seahawks are going to make it a game and possibly come out and Pete Carroll's obviously a good coach, so I think that they could come out and take that one, knowing that they shouldn't have gotten Brand week one at home, and now they need one. But like I said last week, I mean, I don't think Geno's good. He got his money, and now he doesn't care. He had 100 yards or something against the Rams. Kenneth Walker looks solid. They got to keep pounding the ball with him. But you have DK, Smith, and Jigba and Lockett throw the ball. I mean,
Yeah.
Jake Bobo's out there too, and
Bottom line
yeah.
is they have the receivers, and if they aren't going to throw the ball, they're not going to win games. I mean, obviously they can pound the ball and run it. Most people can do that. If you can't, most likely not O-line issue. But for them, if they can't spread the field and get their playmakers in space, then I don't see them having a successful season. And
Mm-hmm.
against a Lions team that is specifically hungry to win right now, it feels like Dan Campbell's got those guys ready to go, ready to win. I think that they're going to be able to take care of business this week.
Right on.
Next game
Yeah.
that we can talk about, Giants Cardinals is kind of Bucks Bears. Bucks looked pretty good in week one. Obviously, we talked about a little bit about that with the Vikings. But 49ers and Rams. Obviously, the Rams, we just talked about being the Seahawks. 49ers absolutely crushed the Steelers. Was not expecting that whatsoever. They came out, put it on them. I think there was like 17 early points, and then it just felt like Pittsburgh was just playing from behind the entire game, couldn't catch up.
Mhm.
And I mean, if the Niners are going to put together team wins like that, it's tough to see them losing many games this season for sure.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm more so interested in how the. I mean, I think the Niners are going to handle the Rams. They did last year, both times. I don't think. I love Puka Nakua. Guy balled last week. Tutu Atwell's kind of just like, eh. I think he's a Louisville guy, but I don't think that's going to be enough to be able to face the Niners roster defensively or offensively. Um, I mean, I was expecting Cam Akers to come out and do something, and he kind of it looked like he might lose his spot to Kyron Williams. So we'll see what happens with that. I'm more interested to see how Pittsburgh does, bouncing back again at home against Cleveland. We were talking last week about if they drafted a lineman, and they did first round. They had Broderick Jones out of Ohio State, and he ended up getting some snaps mid game. They were adjusting the line. It's going to be interesting to see if he gets to play this week or what that ends up looking like. But they also lost Cam Hayward, who's a big part of their defense, and they lost Deontay Johnson, who's obviously him and
One of their
Pickens are the
top
main two.
receivers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one of the main two receivers. So going against a tough Browns team that just made the Bengals look easy, it's going to be interesting to see how that game goes. I'm hoping Pittsburgh bounces back. Deshaun didn't look great. Granted, they won 24-3. They had good field position at the end of the game, kind of when the Bengals had to go for it. But a lot of incompletions that should have been completed, bad throws, a couple drops, I will say. But yeah, him and Burrow both didn't look too good in the rain last week. So I'm hoping Pittsburgh bounces back. We'll see how they perform. It's going to be a low scoring defensive battle, I think.
Yeah, I'm definitely staying away from that one. But if I were to take anything at that in that game, I think I'm looking at the under 38 and a half. Those
Yeah.
defenses, I feel like that's just going to be a war in the trenches, and nobody's getting past the line type of thing. So we'll see how it goes because you got Chubb and you got Najee Harris, who are two of
hmm
the more fearsome guys in the league to run against or to have to tackle. So we'll see how that game goes, but I could definitely see
Yeah,
it being
I
a
could
war
see
in the
a
trenches.
13-10 or 6-9 or something. I mean, something crazy. It's going to be defensive, I think, for sure. But we'll have to come back to that one. I do
For
think
sure.
the game you kind of skipped over was the Giants Cardinals. For a team that's tanking for Caleb Williams, they almost beat the Commanders. Wow. I mean, I thought Commanders were the best pick of the week at -7. Barely won. I think they covered. Or I think they won 20-16. Giants were the only team this week to not score a touchdown. I mean, how about them Cowboys, right? Let's go. But yeah, Giants should bounce back this week. Cardinals are tanking for Caleb. They had a defensive touchdown. Other than that, they didn't really do too much. Giants are a solid football team. They just kind of laid an egg this week. And that Dallas defense, I mean, looked phenomenal. So looking forward to that game against the Jets next week. I'm surprised it opened at 9.5 point line.
Nine.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I know Aaron Rodgers went down, but the Bills just put up 13. So I mean, Cowboys are favored by 10. What is it going to be, a 13-3 game, or
Yeah.
what's going on?
I think they're looking at the Cowboys defense to put up more points, but I think you can't expect a defense to put up 14 points a week.
Yeah,
So
exactly. It's like the offense is new under a new coordinator, obviously, with Kellen Moore being gone. The Cowboys' offense didn't look great. I mean, I think they ended up punching it in for 20 something points, 26 points, but they didn't. I mean, they got good field position on two of them. I mean, they're still figuring it out, and against a solid defense that forced four turnovers. I'm not sure that I like Cowboys -9. I do think that they're going to win it at home, but I think it's going to be a tough game. Maybe they pull it off in the fourth quarter, kind of thing. But it'll be interesting to see how Brees Hall and Dalvin Cook get involved because they can both be explosive, and Zach Wilson's probably going to have to do a lot of checkdowns. And
yeah,
are they explosive enough to get past Michael Parsons? Is the question. So
yeah, and
we'll see
I
how
mean
that game
that
goes.
Cowboys secondary is just going to be ruthless. I mean the Jets as well are really good, but you're looking at a Zach Wilson and a Dak Prescott. Dak's going to be able to push the ball down the field. You're thinking, and that Zach's going to
hmm
be looking for these check downs for the QB design run plays. These things are going to be more drawn up for him, and they're going to have to alter that game plan compared to if Rodgers was in there now and what they've been prepping for the entire season. So it'll be interesting because the Cowboys. One thing I really liked how the Cowboys did was they really implemented Brandon Cooks really well into their game plan. I think he had like 2 or 3 catches in the first half, and it just felt like they were in a good spot, like they were at the right time. And if the Cowboys can do that with Brandon Cooks going forward, I think that CD and Michael Gallup and Ferguson will be able to kind of carry the other bit of the role in catching the ball for them. I think that
Mhm.
CD looked really good. That one cut that he made the dude miss and ended up going like 25 yards down the field. That was insane. It was good to see that out of CD, see that true wide receiver one form out of him. And then Ferguson had a drop. I can't remember where it was. I'm sure he'd like to have that one back. But overall, Cooks just looked like he fit in really well with the rest of the Cowboys wide receiver room. So I'm looking forward to kind of seeing how they implement him into their game plan going forward.
Yeah, yeah, it should be an interesting week for NFL. Obviously, college not so much, but you guys see UFC picks for us. How was last week? What went wrong? What was good?
Yeah, so
What do you got for this week?
UFC Australia was a great card. Obviously, there was a couple huge upsets and a couple things that went wrong that obviously I wasn't expecting. Israel Adesanya losing to Sean Strickland. He got knocked down in the first round, and it just kind of seemed like he wasn't able to recover. He was just trying to find the perfect shot for basically 20 full minutes for the rest of the fight, and never really could. He never really looked like he was able to get any power off. Sean was just able to parry everything that he was bringing, and I was definitely expecting the over 3.5. I remember calling that, but I was not expecting it to go in favor of Strickland. I didn't think that he'd have the movement and have the boxing and kickboxing aura around him enough to be able to take out Adesanya. But I mean, clearly I was wrong. Clearly he just had the dog in him to just walk him down and not give him any space. And he fought
Mhm.
at the perfect fight against Israel Adesanya, and all the other fighters. That's the first thing they said is the man just fought the perfect fight against Izzy, and looks great doing it. And after he fought him, he goes, "That was easy," and it's like that felt like an amateur. It's like, yeah, dude. It's like it's what happens when you don't let Izzy into his range. So
Mhm.
it was interesting. I was not expecting that whatsoever. Other than that, the Tafa pick was huge. He ended up knocking Austin Lane out in I think a minute and 10 seconds or so. If you didn't get a chance to watch that, that was incredible. Just one punch straight to the front of the face and just drops him and swarms him, finishes him easy pick. Love
Mhm.
that -1. I think it was like -165 on Tafa. Absolutely love that pick. The other one that was trouble this week was I had Tuivasa by either KO or TKO or a Volkov decision.
Mhm.
Tuivasa could not find Volkov. Volkov's 6'7" and Ty's like 6 feet, and they're both heavyweights. And it just seemed like Ty was like he was swinging and banging, but he couldn't find Volkov because he was just so damn tall. Like it was literally like he was trying to like punch a skyscraper. It was just like way up in the air. So Ty ended up losing in the second round. He kind of just battled for 2 full rounds. Like the first round, it was kind of back and forth where he'd land a few punches, but Volkov would get a couple straights off. And then in the second round, he ended up slipping, and Volkov was able to just basically wail on him for 3 minutes on the ground until in the final minute he was able to secure a choke to as he tired Ty out to win the fight. And that was the
Yeah.
biggest thing was that one kind of hurt because I was really expecting them to just throw down in that first round and a half. But for Ty to get kind of just tired out in the second round and just kind of roll over, I wasn't really expecting it. So UFC, it's one of those things. It's most lucrative and vulgar things to bet on because you never know what can happen. Grasso can take out a -700 favorite in a Shevchenko, and here we go. We got that rematch coming up again this week. So yeah, this
Mhm.
week we obviously have Shevchenko and Grasso. Big fight. Last time Grasso was able to win by submission and completely shock the world. The biggest thing this week, I would not touch that fight. I think personally that Shevchenko is going to take it by decision. I think she's going to be able to iron out all of the mistakes that she made and be able to fight a more clean fight, a fight that's true to her form. But there are a couple other fights that I really like. Zellhuber and Giagos. I really like Zellhuber in this fight. I just think that he's more well-rounded than Giagos, and he's got the power to knock him out. And I think that this fight will go over a round and a half. I think round 3 may even start, but I do see Zellhuber getting this one done, whether it be by KO in round 2 or 3 or by decision. So that's definitely the first play I'm looking at. The second play that I have is Kopylov. He fights against Josh Fremd. Fremd has beaten a couple not as good opponents And I think that Kopilov is just going to be able to kind of expose him this weekend. So I definitely I'm picking Kopilov to win. Um, so yeah, those are the two main ones that I have for this week. Another one to look out for, Knudsen is, I think, coming into her debut fight or her second fight. She fights Man. I expect that one to go over a round and a half, and I expect Knudsen to take it by decision. Not too
Well,
sure, but yeah, Knudsen to win would be another good place to look at putting some money down, because not many people know her, not many people know how to line the fight, but I think that she will be able to take that one by decision.
yeah, it should be an interesting weekend with it. And also, I was going to say I got a couple soccer for us this week. I know we got the games. We're off last week, and not going to go into too much detail about them. But Arsenal's playing Everton, and I mean Arsenal's just a way better team, so I expect them to have no problem handling Everton. Liverpool is going to play Wolverhampton. Again, Liverpool started slow last year, ended up getting it together, started this season. I think they're 4 games in. They look solid. And then Man City, obviously, is a team that I love to root for. It's hard not to with, Grealish and Holland and De Bruyne. They're playing West Hampton United. So those are the 3 games I'm looking at is Arsenal, Liverpool, Man City. You can't really go wrong betting the big dogs. So I like each of those plays this week. And then I wanted to shout out WNBA as the playoffs started today. I haven't followed it much because the Liberty and the Aces are so much better than everybody else. Those are the two I'm expecting to see at the end of the year. Aces are expected to win it. So I don't know. Probably going to try and watch a game here or there, at least see what that's looking like. But I know the playoffs started, so shout out to anyone that likes the WNBA. And we'll try and get into the NBA coming up soon. I know we're about a month out from the season starting. Excited to get that underway. I know there's a lot of talk about, Germany just won. Canada knocked off USA in the matchup for third. And then Steph, LeBron, AD, all these guys are looking at playing in the 2024 Olympics in Paris. So that should be interesting to talk about as well as just preparing for the next season.
Yeah, this NBA season is definitely going to be exciting.
Yeah, seeing the health of a lot of teams, they just implemented new rules on that too for how many people I think that you can have sitting that are star players, whatever classifies as a star player. I think you can only have one at a time. So teams like the Clippers are just going to be getting fined if they keep Kawhi and PG on the bench all year. Shout out to the Clippers. That's where my boy Russ is at. So I mean, we're still rooting for him.
Yeah, does
Uh,
Russ constitute a
but
star player?
yeah, I mean, not with the criticism that he gets anymore, but yeah, I mean, he probably would be if they sat him for a game. So yeah, we'll be getting into NBA soon. Playoffs are coming up for MLB in about a month, but yeah, thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys next week. Obviously, with a much better slate for college football. So if you have friends, share the podcast with them. Again, give it a like, a comment, tell us what you want to hear, and we'll love to talk about it. So thanks for joining us.
All right, thanks, guys.